My friends, Germany wants to build Europe's largest army. Last time we heard that, yeah. No, don't worry, it's not going to happen again.
This time we're gonna win.
Jokes aside, how is Germany going to achieve this goal of building Europe's strongest army? Wehrdienstmodernisierungsgesetz. We have our answer here from the Daily Mail. Germany moves towards military conscription, with lottery for over 18s to make up numbers in the army. Wait, hold on, you need at least 10% war support to enact limited conscription. But there's more! Euronews added, modern military service is coming. Germany will require all men to register for potential military service from January 1st, 2026, by making the registration and medical screening of all males over 18 mandatory. As always, when war knocks at the door, gender equality goes out the window. Now, if it all goes through as planned, the objective is to make the Bundeswehr kriegstüchtig, or war ready. I mean, good luck. Because at the same time, German army struggles to get Gen Z recruits ready for war. No shit! You push propaganda for the youth to hate their own country and history, and then you're surprised nobody wants to defend the country. We also know exactly who they think the enemy will be. And if you live in Europe, you might find this interesting. CNN reported Federal Minister of Defense Pistorius suggested Berlin's new military system could set an example for other European allies. Everybody's watching what we're doing. So in this video, we'll break down why the Bundeswehr needs conscription, what form it will take, and how Germany plans to implement this reform. Let's be real, the internet is like the modern battlefield with drones all around you. Every click, every scroll, you're being watched, tracked, and targeted. Unless you're covered by a VPN. Then, you're invisible to the enemy. Huge thanks to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video. CyberGhost routes your traffic through a secure encrypted tunnel, keeping your IP hidden and your data private. And trust me, we've seen how pipelines and tunnels can change the course of a battle. Instead of using your incognito window, just turn on CyberGhost VPN before you browse. It encrypts and reroutes 100% of your traffic through their secure servers, so no one will even know about your online activity. What's more, CyberGhost VPN doesn't keep logs, so not even themselves know what you do online. With just a few clicks, you can change your virtual location. For example, from Canada, let's pick Australia. And that way you can instantly unlock geo-blocked content from tons of streaming services such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney+. You can even snatch better online deals and play games blocked in your region. CyberGhost works on all major platforms: Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, even smart TVs and consoles. One subscription covers up to 7 devices, so it's perfect for sharing with family and friends. Right now they're offering an insane deal. $2.03 per month plus 4 months for free. That's 84% off, along with a 45-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 support. Join over 38 million users and grab your discount via the link in the description below. CyberGhost VPN will keep you safe. Honestly, I think it was about time for the German military to wake up. As you know, I've made a few videos teasing the French army, although for valid reasons. But we all remember the infamous reports on the poor state of the Bundeswehr. Here are some articles to refresh your memory. We'll go through it. Rokitsuki. 2015, German army so under-equipped that it used broomsticks instead of machine guns. Let's just say the Malian army had the same problem. 2018, a parliamentary report found the Bundeswehr dramatically bad. That was probably the worst year for the German military in the past decades. The Financial Times wrote that at the end of the year, 6 out of 6 submarines were not in use. At times, not one of the 14 Airbus A400M transport aircraft could fly. Meanwhile, only a handful of Eurofighters were combat ready, apparently only 4 out of 128 fighter aircraft. And overall, 21,000 officer and non-commissioned officer positions were vacant in the German armed forces. This meant that many units were led by personnel acting in higher rank, aka Vertretungsweise wahrgenommen, or had critical gaps in platoon leaders, company commanders, or specialist NCO roles. With such odds in 2018, Luxembourg could have easily invaded Germany. But that's not all, I told you it was a bad year. The Bundeswehr was due to take over leadership of NATO's multinational Very High Readiness Joint Task Force. But whoops, Germany's 9th Tank Brigade only had 9 operational Leopard 2 tanks, even though it promised to have 44 ready for the NATO exercise. And only 3 of the promised 14 Marder IFVs were operational. And on top of this prime example of Deutsche Qualität, the German military faced some problems in Lithuania. An internal Bundeswehr report leaked to the Rheinische Post newspaper on Monday warned that the military lacked not just tanks and helicopters, but also bulletproof vests, tents, and winter clothing that were necessary for the mission. You gotta be kidding me! The Germans going to war in the East without winter clothing! This has to be a joke! 2022. Germany's second lot of Puma IFVs under questions following breakdowns. When 18 Pumas suffered total failure during training, the German media ended up calling the Puma the Pannenpanzer, the breakdown tank. The Pumas faced technical flaws like leaky roof hatches, electronics issues, and restricted driver sightlines. It's funny because my Jetta had the exact same problems. 2023 Bundeswehr tank park has serious problems. Only 30% of the Leopard 2s were operational. Same for PZH 2000 self-propelled howitzers. Only 30% of them were combat ready. As a whole, Germany only had 3 days worth of ammunition and still struggled to gather a full battalion for a NATO exercise. No improvements compared to 2018. 2024, intercepted calls revealed senior Bundeswehr officers discussing Taurus missile strikes on Russia's Kerch bridge. And then the Panzer General Bros got a little bit too excited when Ukraine launched its offensive into Kursk Oblast. 2025, 50% battle ready, where we learn how land forces overall sit at 50% combat readiness. 1 month later, Politico reported, Germany's military, or Bundeswehr, is shrinking, aging, and still lacks essential equipment. The Bundeswehr actually shrunk by 340 troops at the end of 2024. There were not enough recruits to make up for the numbers of people leaving the armed forces. We could also read that the German military was getting older due to a lack of young recruits, with the average age rising to 34. Because of that, German officials said, we must urgently stop and reverse this trend. And this is what Germany finally did. But what was their brilliant idea to put the German military back on track? Before we can answer that, did you know that Germany only suspended mandatory military service fairly recently? For example, in the year 2000, when France had just stopped mandatory military service, 130,000 German males were drafted to serve for a duration of 10 months. During that period, only about 30 to 40% of an age cohort actually ended up doing military service. The rest escaped through generous medical exemptions, automatic university deferrals, many just kept studying until they aged out, and then there was the Zivildienst, the hugely popular civilian alternative service. All these tricks were accepted because Germany's post-Cold War army no longer needed or wanted hundreds of thousands of reluctant conscripts. So in practice, military service was voluntary. This number of 130,000 conscripts progressively decreased over the next decade and reached 45,000 conscripts by 2010. It's only in 2011 that Germany fully transitioned from compulsory service in favor of an all-volunteer force. However, this transition was not as smooth as expected, and recruitment proved to be rather difficult. In a Germany where being proud of your nation was frowned upon. Actually, some military personnel that were a bit too proud ended up in jail. Who could have thought that all this could impact military enlistment rates? Absolutely mind-blowing. However, we are now witnessing the rebirth of Germany as a proud military power. In June 2024, Germany set aside its shame over its military past to mark its first Veterans Day since World War II, with new legislation stating that the day should be celebrated publicly and visibly every year on June 15th. A symbolic date as it is on June 15th, 1955, that the first volunteers were officially accepted into the newly founded Bundeswehr.
Leaders like Defense Minister Boris Pistorius have praised the initiative as long overdue appreciation.
Yes, maybe they're a bit rusty, Maybe they're not very comfortable doing all this, but they gotta start somewhere, right? Germany's done apologizing. I mean, it was about time. It's been 80 years since the end of World War II. And now their country wants to rebuild its armed forces to be the backbone of European defense. To do so, the Bundeswehr aims to expand the military from 180,000 to 260,000 active personnel and 200,000 reservists by 2035. No, actually, that's not it. I read your comments about my poor English skills. From what I read, it's reservists. Reservisten! If we go on the Bundeswehr's website and go to the Zahlen und Fakten section, numbers and facts, we can see that as of August 31st, 2025, the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, had 28,000 personnel. The Kriegsmarine, nowadays it's just Marine, 15,500, and there were only 62,000 soldiers as part of the ground forces. Yeah, you're not gonna bully anyone with those stats. So how can Germany reach the goal of 260,000 active duty personnel and 200,000 reservists by 2035? First, let's take a step back. You see, in 2020, the German military's yearly target was 18,000 recruits. By 2024, this target increased to 22,000. Thing is, actual recruitment kept falling short. And like I told you earlier, by the end of 2024, the German armed forces even slightly decreased in size because of that. To turn things around, the November 2025 plan aims for a gradual increase with an objective to reach 40,000 annual recruits by 2031. The plan is simple. First, prioritize voluntary enlistments through financial compensation. This is the policy that the German center-left wants to push. But then the center-right said, if voluntary targets are not met, Bedarfswehrpflicht, a limited compulsory service for a specific number of young men. As a result, Germany is building a massive personnel database for anyone turning 18. Essentially the opposite of what Epstein was doing. Too early. For example, there are 675,000 people in Germany's 2008 cohort, meaning those that will turn 18 in 2026, of which there are an estimated 345,000 males, down 22% compared to the male cohort that turned 18 in 1995. So let's go through Germany's plan for modern conscription point by point. So, as of now, the Bundeswehr opted for the original Danish model. Males only, lottery, and shorter duration of service. Point number 1. All 18-year-old men will be required to fill up a questionnaire. The moment they turn 18, the government will send them a congratulations card with a QR code, linking to the questionnaire on personal information, motivation, fitness, and answering this questionnaire is mandatory. There are fines of up to 500 euros for non-compliance. And I'm sure the government will launch some political dodgeballs in the questions. Do you have a special interest in Hindu symbols and Norse mythology? How many times a week do you go to the shisha bar? Oh yeah, apparently females will also receive the readiness questionnaire to assess their potential for service, but it will not be mandatory for them to answer. The Germans want to keep this as a sausage fest for now. Then these 18-year-old males will have to undergo medical and psychological examination at one of the 20 Bundeswehr centers. Up until now, pretty straightforward. Actually, most Scandinavian countries follow the same procedure. 18 is convenient because that's when people finish high school. And this should also fix the aging problem of the Bundeswehr. Now, it's not because it's an easy solution that we should do it. Because let's be honest, 18-year-olds nowadays are not like 18-year-olds during World War II. I think Germany should also find a way to conscript older men into the force. We see in Ukraine that they can hold their ground on the battlefield, but they could especially be useful for support roles like truck driver, forklift operator, or even construction worker, for example. And actually, according to the latest news, the Bundeswehr is increasingly outsourcing to firms like Lufthansa and Deutsche Bahn for dual-use logistics. So there's definitely something that could be done. Apart from Ukraine, there's also a historical example in the benefits of enlisting older recruits. That is the US 77th Division, nicknamed the Old Bastards. During World War II, the US Army drafted blue-collar workers in their 30s and 40s, which was very old at the time. What they lacked in stamina, they made up for in discipline. Very few desertions were to be reported. They had among the lowest number of psychiatric breakdowns, and they were more cautious and cool-headed in battle, meaning they reached their objectives while suffering less casualties. And I think it's something that should be studied because if we see in Ukraine, there are people of all ages sitting in the trenches side by side. But for now, the Bundeswehr prefers 18-year-olds, barely legal teens. Point number 2, if voluntary enlistments fall short. Wehrdienstmodernisierungsgesetz, which essentially will launch a draft lottery that will determine who will serve in the Bundeswehr, and this lottery will be done on the computer for maximum transparency. This system is actually directly inspired by the Danish model. It would mainly target a pool of motivated candidates rather than universal mandatory service. In Denmark, only about 25% of the male cohort are drafted into the military through a lottery system, with a minimum service of 4 months. Starting in 2026, females will also be integrated into the selective conscription, and service will be extended to 11 months. Not only Denmark, but Norway also has conscription, and it works. And because of such examples, Sweden reinstated it in 2017. They went straight for the gender-neutral conscription, even in the dorms. And from what I heard, yeah, a lot of conscripts do a second workout at night in the barracks. However, in Sweden, the selection is not done through a lottery. Everyone, male or female, fills up a questionnaire, and the military only selects the most motivated candidates, emphasizing on quality over quantity. So essentially, it's like a job interview for something that perhaps you don't want to do. In the end, about 25 to 30% of respondents are called for further physical and mental examination, and only 6-7% of an age cohort in Sweden end up being drafted, and that for a duration of 11 months. So in Sweden, it's a privilege to serve in the armed forces. But we also know why Sweden is particularly picky as to who they bring in the military.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
But for now, Germany will follow the old Danish model. For now, the Bundeswehr targets 6,000 recruits annually starting in 2026, so 1.6% of the age cohort, or 1 in 60. However, they plan to scale up to an average of 20,000 recruits by 2030. That means about 5.5% of that year's male cohort will get drafted, or 1 in 18 males. Honestly, I think it's very reasonable. It's clever because you can filter out the bad apples from the draft pool, and we know the system works because of all the feedback we get from Scandinavian countries. And as you can imagine, this partial conscription could be implemented across Europe. As a matter of fact, France literally just announced that it would also start this voluntary military service starting in 2026. At first, the French armed forces are looking for a contingent of 3,000 males or females between 18 and 19 years old, but this would grow to 10,000 by 2030 and 50,000 by 2035. Service would last 10 months for financial compensation of 800 euros per month on top of food and accommodation. Now, for all these countries, but especially Germany, let's be honest, if you read between the lines, there is one aspect we have to take into consideration. And like we said earlier, they can remove some people unfit for duty from the draft pool if you don't answer to the questionnaire correctly, you know. Of course, you don't want to teach weapons handling to just about anyone. This is especially important in a modern Germany that has a very diverse demographics. According to a government report from 2010, 34.4% of children under 5 years in 2008 had a migration background. 1 in 3 German youth have migration background. Those are the youth targeted by the upcoming conscription. In a 2016 internal Bundeswehr study, 26% of enlisted personnel had Migrationshintergrund, or migration background. But to be fair, this term is often thrown around, but it's very blurry. Because turns out half of those migration backgrounds in the German army actually have Russian origins. Otherwise, you have lots of Poles, Romanians, Ukrainians, the Balkan boys. Essentially not the right kind of diversity, am I right? But perhaps the Germans are going to go the complete other way. Check this out. In this document, page 93, the German federal government clearly states that the objective is to increase the proportion of women and people with a migration history in the Bundeswehr.
Again!
Never go full woke. In that case, I guess the questionnaires will also have to be in Turkish and Arabic. Point number 3, the total service period will be 6 months, with half allocated to basic training. So once again, this is modeled on the Danish 4 months military service. With 6 months, you just have enough time to go through 3 months of basic training and then maybe 3 months of specialized training. But I find the 6 month for the Bundeswehr a bit low. I mean, at the same time, it's better than nothing. And 6 months is reasonable enough for German 18-year-olds to sign up. It doesn't put their life to a full stop. Some might even like the military and enlist full time. And I think that's the overall strategy. On top of that, for the Bundeswehr, it's a rapid and cost-effective way to build up the pool of reservists. If Germany follows the Danish and Swedish models, these conscripts will automatically be part of the reserve. And because of that, they will be required to participate in refresher military training every year. Although I could not find any details on this, once again, if we follow the Scandinavian model, this should be around 14 days per year. Not great, not terrible. And we can expect the Bundeswehr to eventually increase the duration of service to 11 months like the Scandinavian countries and France. Essentially, the Bundeswehr plans to grow from 50,000 active duty reservists to 200,000 in 8 years. And that's how Germany wants to build Europe's strongest army. This reform has a real chance of succeeding as long as the training environment is adequate and the overriding priority is choosing the most qualified individuals for military service. Remains numerous questions about the duration of service, the implementation of reserves, and the yearly refresher training. However, we cannot ignore the risk that Germany will use this partial conscription as a political tool aimed at integrating minorities and artificially boost their representation in the armed forces. Don't forget to click the link in the description below to grab the special GhostVPN discount available for all our viewers. It keeps your data safe while you browse and unlocks all blocked content online. All for just $2.03 per month. It's completely risk-free, so check it out today.